Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. We recently did a video talking about Klean Engineering Corporation, one of the most popular and ancient Starship manufacturers in the galaxy. Throughout its existence, CEC has designed thousands of different models and starships. And this design firm definitely has a style that makes their ships extremely recognizable. And they have a very large and loyal fan base who swears by their products. In today's video, what I want to take a look at is the other end of the spectrum, and that's much smaller manufacturers and shipyards that are known for basically just one or two designs. You know, the process of designing, setting up the production and marketing of a vessel is extremely competitive and difficult, even for the larger firms in the Star Wars galaxy. And so it's very unique and special when a smaller manufacturer manages to get their product out there. It doesn't even need to beat the products from the larger companies because, you know, they're kind of running their own race in their own category. Every good Star Wars RPG needs a good ship. And that's because when we travel to the Star Wars galaxy as fans, we always want to see multiple planets and explore. In KOTOR, we have the Ebon Hawk. In The Force Unleashed, there was the Rogue Shadow, and in Jedi Outcast, you had Raven's Claw. These ships serve as far more than just a base for operations and transportation. They are the player's home. And this really does mirror the role ships play in the main Star Wars films and TV shows as well. You have Han and Chewie's Millennium Falcon, the Bad Batch's Marauder, you have Din Djarin's Razor Crest, Ahsoka's T6 Jedi Shuttle, and Luthen Rael's Fondor Hallcraft. Now, as you can tell, all these people we mentioned are a bit eccentric. They're loners, they're adventurers, very independent-minded, and that's perhaps why they spend their time amongst the stars in their own personal ship, rather than settling on one specific planet. I mean, why live in a box in some Duracrete jungle when you can bring that box with you anywhere in the galaxy? People who think like this are definitely a special breed. Individuals like Grease Dritus, the captain of the Stinger Mantis, an ally of Cal Kestis. Like Han Solo, Grease started out as a hustler, looking out only for himself. But then, he found a greater calling.
Before you came along, all I cared about was a tight hand on a stiff eater. That's a game term.
I know what it is.
Grease was a Latteron, a species known for having an additional pair of arms. There are a few species in the galaxy that share this trait, like the Basilisk and Ardenians. These extra limbs, and perhaps equally as important, the brain power and coordination necessary to use them all, made these species excellent pilots. And so it's only natural for Latteran pilots to have a much more advanced custom control scheme that will allow them to kind of maneuver the ship in ways you really couldn't with just two arms. And Grease Dritus's Stinger Mantis is a great example of this type of control scheme. His ship was a S-161XL, a luxury yacht that comes from Latero Spaceworks. Most of you have probably never heard of this shipbuilder, and this is really the only product that we know they built. But judging by its design and how it's functioned in both the Jedi games, seems to be pretty well built. This was a long and beautiful yacht, and it was able to keep Cal and his company safe and comfortable throughout all of their crazy adventures. One of the more unusual features of the ship was the large outrigger engine that rotates around the main body of the ship. It's an expensive and complex design that requires additional maintenance, and generally speaking, you only see these types of designs on a smaller starship like a B-Wing, for instance. I imagine scaling it up to a yacht size is going to be a lot more difficult, and it's going to cost a lot more maintenance. Good thing is Grease is also a mechanic, so he probably knows how to fix everything. And since Latterons have an additional pair of arms, it would make sense to add another controllable surface onto the ship that gives pilots extra option for thrust direction. Overall, Latteron Spaceworks' design here isn't for most species, but one cannot deny its natural beauty and respect Grease's ability to pilot the ship. Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, Ownasaber.com. They make these very awesome premium lightsabers. And now that November is here, they'll be rolling out their Black Friday monthly special. Buy any Replica category lightsaber and you can get a free Padawan lightsaber for free. Simply add both of these blades to your shopping cart and their system will automatically make the Padawan blade free. This offer runs from November 1st to November 30th. I personally have my eyes on the Malgus. Yes, you guys remember that brute of a Sith Lord from the old Republic era? His lightsaber hilt has two blade-shaped guards, which kind of makes the weapon look like an entrenching tool of some kind. Makes it useful even when the emitter is broken in combat. And you can pair that with the much less serious Padawan saber known as the Last Brick. Giant Lego hand claws are not included. For more information about this deal, check out our description down below. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. The planet Naboo is quite small from a population standpoint, especially if you sweep the Gungans back into their swamps and only count the humans. But for security and perhaps cultural reasons, the Naboo monarchy decided to set up their own starship design and manufacturing based out of the palace complex on Theed. Known as the Theed Palace Space Vessel Engineering Corps, this wasn't really a company, it was more like a private manufacturer that worked only for the monarchy. This wasn't about making profits or any kind of groundbreaking ships, it was about serving the needs of the Naboo. And the Naboo were idealistic individuals, and they wanted their warships to reflect the cultural values of the planet. They wanted aesthetically beautiful ships to represent the monarchy, and they wanted these ships to utilize environmentally friendly technologies. Theed Palace Engineering would keep these requirements in mind while designing the N1 starfighter for the Naboo Royal Space Fighter Corps. The N1 was a truly special ship, and what made it so special starts out with the fuel it used. You see, the entire crisis on Naboo that started years before the Clone Wars began revolved around the Trade Federation's presence on the planet. They had been invited by the previous administration to help set up mining and transport facilities for the large plasma deposits found beneath the surface of the planet. This plasma was a unique energy source because it was so pure in nature that when it was used to power engines, it gave off far less emissions. Theed Palace would make sure that the N1 would utilize this energy source. On top of that, they made the N1 extremely sleek and small, which made it nimble and agile, and perfect for its more defensive roles and interception missions. The N1 did have some weaknesses though. It wasn't particularly good in the ground attack mission, but I guess that's okay because again, this was mainly for a planetary defense force. Overall, the N1 starfighter was extremely expensive to produce, not only because the Naboo only ordered a small batch of them, but because of the cutting-edge technology like an advanced autopilot and premium parts like the G-type Nubian 221 Sunlight engines. You know, as much money as the Naboo had, they probably didn't have enough money to design their own components like, engines and hyperdrives. They had to still buy these off the shelf, and they really did like Nubian designs, and so a lot of their ships had components from the Nubians. Theed Palace Space Vessel Engineering Corps would also be responsible for building several yachts and cruisers for their monarch's visit to other systems and other planets. These were all one-off designs and were basically a work of art. They also used Nubian components, and they were also usually covered in chromium. The X-Wing is perhaps one of the most famous starfighters in the entire galaxy. It was the snub fighter that helped the rebellion win the war. It took down both Death Stars, hundreds of Star Destroyers, and countless Imperial TIE fighters. The X-Wing is really the ship that made Incom Corporation the household name that would become during the New Republic period. The X-Wing can trace its lineage back through the Clone Wars with the ARC 170 design all the way back to the pre-Clone Wars era with the Z95 Headhunter, Incom Corporation's first true starfighter. In many ways, Incom took a look at these two older designs and took all of their strengths and none of their weaknesses and brought them over to the X-Wing. What most people don't realize is prior to the Z95, Incom was mainly known for just producing repulsor lifts, including the massive ones that kept Cloud City floating over the gas giant Bespin. And so the Z95 was actually a huge leap for Incom Corporation. They really had no knowledge on how to build a starfighter, and so instead of building a starfighter from the ground up, they instead brought a prototype from a company known as Bahalian Shipyard. Originally known as the Onyx Star prototype, the Z95 was a perfectly balanced starfighter. It was nimble, easy to fly, and quite fast. It was also relatively cheap and efficient as well when it came to performance. We just talked about the repulsor lifts that kept Cloud City up. But did you know that Bespin also had their own small vehicle manufacturing firm? You see, Bespin was a gas giant, and Cloud City was mainly built for its employees who worked in the Tabana gas mining industry. But the city would grow over the years to a population of 6 million due to Lando Calrissian's great management skills. And mining Tabana gas was a very profitable industry with very large margins, especially when there were galactic wars or just not enough commodities to be traded. And as Bespin became richer, it only makes sense that they would have their own vehicle company. Also, Lando Calrissian, the administrator of the city, was always known for his business acumen and interest in exploring new industries. Now, Bespin Motors was first established to basically support the mining operations on the gas giant below the city. And this meant that they usually produce repulsor sleds for moving equipment and raw materials around. But they would also try their hands in creating a smaller speeder known as the Storm 4 Twin Pod. This strange little patrol craft was utilized by the Bespin Wind Guard to keep law and order. The craft featured two pods connected by a central strut that also housed the engines. The ion engine utilized here is not all that different from the TIE Fighter's engine, and the Cloud Car also had a light blaster cannon. The Cloud Car is often ridiculed by people who see it, but in my opinion, it does the job that's required of it. Also, when you're such a small company like Bespin Motors, you just have limited resources. You can't spend a lot of money on research and design. During the aftermath of the assassination attempt of Senator Padme Amidala, the young senator was sent back to her homeworld of Naboo with her Jedi guardian Anakin Skywalker. The two decided to take public transportation in order to keep their departure hidden, and they essentially booked a flight on the Star Wars equivalent of Frontier Airlines. I mean, everyone always gives Spirit Airlines a lot of crap, but we shouldn't leave out Frontier. If anything, they're kind of worse than Spirit, right? Anyway, this here is an AA-9 freighter liner, a 390-meter long box with a Class 4 hyperdrive. It can and probably should be only hauling tons of supplies, but you could also fit 30,000 passengers in there. It's cheap and it gets the job done. And it's built by a relatively unknown company known as Boba Jeff Shipyards. The AA-9 freighter liner would actually propel the company into the limelight as the AA-9 would become popular during the Clone Wars. It would transport not only civilian freight and passengers, but also war material and troops for the Galactic Republic. After this initial success, Boba Jeff would use the new capital to design and build a military vessel known as the SS-54 assault ship. Although Boba Jeff Shipyards was probably too small to compete for larger federal contracts, plenty of independent buyers lined up for this gunship, which was competitively priced and featured a Class 2 hyperdrive. Most of the buyers were either mercenaries or bounty hunters, but that doesn't really matter, does it? Boba Jeff would also design and build the Mako Ta space docks. It was originally a shipyard that would be used by the rebellion to gather their fleet. If I asked you which ship served not only the Clone Wars and the Galactic Civil War, but also the Resistance versus First Order War, well, there's only really a handful. You could probably say the Z95 Headhunter that we mentioned before, but a far better answer would be the BTL Y-Wing series from Conan Manufacturing. Conan Manufacturing dabbled in all sorts of different areas in the shipbuilding industry. It designed protection like flight helmets. It also made important components like ion engines and hyperdrives. When the Clone Wars started, Conan saw an opportunity. The galaxy had been demilitarized for almost 1,000 years, and so a lot of the infrastructure, the military-industrial complex, had basically just faded away or rotted away, if anything. And so now, whoever could get these large federal contracts that the Republic was giving out due to the Clone Wars could potentially secure their future as a shipbuilder. Conan Manufacturing strategically designed the BTLB Y-Wing. It would help balance out the Galactic Republic Starfighter Corps, which early on in the war was mainly made up of the V-19 Torrent fighter and the Jedi's Nimble Delta 7 Ether Sprite. I mean, both ships were interceptors, and they were very light interceptors. They hardly had any protection on them, and they didn't really have heavy munitions either. The Y-Wing, which was an assault bomber, could do both of those things very well. So well that the Y-Wing would continue to live on during the Imperial era. Despite the Empire's attempt to scrap the vessel, Rebel forces were still able to steal or buy as many of these old Clone Wars ships as they could get their hands on, and they also refit them for combat. This variant would even get its own designation, the BTLA-4 Y-Wing. This variant had its engine cowls removed, which decreased the length of the ship and also the weight, and it gave mechanics easier access to the engines for maintenance. And this was without Conacer's help, really. I mean, this was just something they did on the run here. And Conan Manufacturing really struggled when the Empire came to power, since most of their starships didn't rely on hyperdrives. Suddenly, Conan Manufacturing's parts business started doing really bad. After the Galactic Civil War ended, the popularity of the Y-Wing gave Conan an opportunity to reboot the Y-Wing. This time, they basically copied all the fixes the Rebel engineers made and produced the BTA-NR-2 Y-Wing. So we started off today's video talking about Corellian Engineering Corporation, and I want to end this video talking about them as well. You see, in true Corellian fashion, CEC actually had a lot of competition from smaller manufacturers on its own planet, including a company known as Klean Space. They were a much smaller outfit, and they had a much simpler and easier to reach goal, and that was to challenge CEC's dominance in just one category, and that is the smaller freighter market. Specifically, Klean Space wanted to take on the YT series. Their response was this, the Jim Snore Light Freighter. Overall, there were 3 variants of this ship, and there were many design flaws that made this ship actually inferior to the YT series. And so, generally speaking, it was very common to see these ships outside of the Corellian system. So there you have it, guys. Those are a few different ship manufacturers that are really just known for one or two different types of ship designs. They managed to find a niche, or they just got lucky and they went with it. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. My name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.